The Monday morning air in my Sterling financial office was thick with unspoken accusations. I could feel my boss, Marcus Thorne, staring from his glass-walled corner office. I knew this was coming. The photo from the Vanguard Capital Gala was all over industry feeds. Me, smiling, shaking hands with their CEO, a ghost at my rival's feast. Finally, his voice crackled over the intercom. "Read, my office, now." The photo was already on his monitor, a digital guillotine. "David," he began, his voice dangerously calm, "explain why my top analyst was celebrating with the enemy." I kept my expression neutral. He wouldn't get the satisfaction. "It was a networking event, Marcus." He just smirked. "Pack your things, you're done." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just let his words hang in the air between us. 20 years I'd given this firm. 20 years of 80-hour weeks, missed birthdays, and dinners eaten cold at my desk. I wasn't just an analyst. I was the architect of Sterling's biggest successes. Marcus and I had started in the same bullpen, two hungry associates from Chicago with big dreams. He climbed the corporate ladder, and I built the very rungs he climbed on. I was his ghostwriter, his strategist, the brain behind his throne. But somewhere along the way, he became a king who feared his own court. He saw loyalty as a tool and paranoia as a shield. He couldn't fathom that my presence at the Vanguard Gala wasn't an act of betrayal, but a calculated business move. Years ago, I saw the rot setting into Sterling's foundation, so I made a quiet investment, a lifeboat, a small personal stake in Vanguard Capital, funded by the bonuses Marcus had so begrudgingly signed off on. He thought he was cutting loose a traitor. He had no idea he was lighting the fuse on a rocket he helped me build. Walking out of Sterling Financial, box in hand, my mind wasn't on the street below. It was 20 years in the past, in a cramped bullpen smelling of stale coffee and cheap ambition. Marcus and I were nothing then. Just two kids from the South Side who'd somehow clawed our way into the heart of Chicago finance. We shared a vision, a hunger. We'd cover for each other, work through the night on pitch decks, fueled by the dream of one day seeing our names on the door. I was the numbers guy, the architect. He was the salesman, the closer. We were a perfect team. The first crack appeared during the Midcon Energy merger. It was my baby. I'd spent 6 months building the valuation models, finding the synergies that would make us legendary. I sacrificed family dinners, my kids' soccer games, sleeping on a cot in my office. On the final day, I handed Marcus the finished proposal, a masterpiece of financial engineering. He looked at the cover page, where both our names were listed, and gave me a thin, proprietary smile. The next morning he presented it to the board, alone. My name was gone, erased like a stray mark on a spreadsheet. When I confronted him later, he just clapped me on the shoulder, his grip a little too tight. "It's about the firm, Davey, not about us. We got the win, that's what matters." But I saw it in his eyes. It was never about the firm, it was about him. That was the day he stopped being my partner and started being my king. From then on, my ideas became his initiatives. My strategies became his vision. He built his corner office on a foundation of my late nights, and with every floor he ascended, his paranoia grew. He'd question my calls, double-check my client emails as if he expected me to pull the same stunt on him that he'd so masterfully pulled on me. He couldn't comprehend partnership. He only understood dominance and the constant fear of someone coming for his throne. The final straw was the Atherton Tech deal. I begged him to get in on the ground floor. I had the data, the projections. It was a guaranteed 10-bagger. He dismissed it in front of the entire team, calling it too risky, too unproven. A year later, Atherton went public and became the biggest IPO of the decade. Sterling missed out on billions, all because Marcus was too scared and too arrogant to listen to the man who built his career. That night, I went home and didn't sleep. I looked at the bonus statement on my desk, the one he'd fought to reduce, and saw it not as a reward, but as a refund for all the credit I was owed. I realized Sterling wasn't a stable ship anymore. It was Marcus's private yacht, and he was steering it straight for an iceberg. The next morning, I opened a private brokerage account. I didn't buy a boat or a new car. I bought my lifeboat. I bought a quiet, significant stake in the one company I knew was smart enough to pick up the pieces when Marcus finally crashed, Vanguard Capital. It wasn't treason. It was insurance. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing me off from the life I'd known. But standing on the cold Chicago pavement, that cardboard box of personal effects felt less like a burden and more like a starter pistol. I didn't go to a bar to drown my sorrows. I didn't call my wife to tell her the bad news. I pulled out my phone, walked to a quiet corner overlooking the river, and dialed a number I'd committed to memory, the private line of Evelyn Hayes, CEO of Vanguard Capital. She answered on the second ring. Hayes. Evelyn, it's David Reed. We spoke at the gala. A slight pause. I remember. I also saw you made the news this morning. My condolences. Don't be sorry, I said, my voice steady. Be interested. Marcus Thorne just handed you the keys to his kingdom. I'm calling to give you the map. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a minimalist conference room on the 80th floor of the Vanguard Tower, a view of the entire city sprawling beneath us. Evelyn Hayes was exactly as I'd remembered. Sharp, direct, with eyes that missed nothing. She slid a bottle of water across the polished granite table. So you're a disgruntled employee looking for payback. I get a dozen of those a month, David. I slid a single folder back across to her. I'm not a disgruntled employee. I'm your second largest individual shareholder outside of the founding family. Her composure cracked for just a second. She opened the folder, scanned the brokerage statements, and her eyes narrowed. She looked up at me, a new respect dawning. All right, Mr. Reed, you have my full attention. Marcus Thorne thinks he's a king, I began, leaning forward. But a king is nothing without his court and his treasury. I built both for him, and I can dismantle them. I tapped the table. First, the people. Sarah Jenkins in risk management, Tom Alvarez in acquisitions, and Maria Flores heading the tech portfolio. They are the holy trinity of Sterling. I know their compensation packages, I know their career frustrations, and I know Marcus has taken credit for their biggest wins. I wrote the talking points for how you poach them. They're not loyal to Sterling, they're just waiting for a better offer. Evelyn was silent, absorbing every word. Second, I continued, the clients, North Star Logistics. Marcus parades that account around like a trophy. He doesn't know their CEO is terrified of their pension fund's underperformance, a weakness Marcus is too arrogant to see. I designed a derivative strategy 6 months ago to hedge that exact risk. Marcus called it unnecessarily complex. It's on a thumb drive in my pocket. You walk into their boardroom with that solution, and the North Star account is yours by Friday. I listed 3 more cornerstone clients, each with a specific, surgical vulnerability that only I, their architect, could possibly know. This wasn't a rant. It was a business plan. A corporate decapitation strike. I sat back, my part said. The silence in the room was absolute. Evelyn stared at the folder, then at me. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. It was the same smile I'd seen on Marcus years ago, but this time it was aimed at him. Sterling's non-compete agreements are notoriously ironclad, she said, testing me. And I know the loopholes in every single one. I countered. Because I helped the lawyers draft them. Evelyn Hayes closed the folder and pushed it back to me. She didn't need it. She stood up and extended a hand. Welcome to Vanguard, David. Let's get to work. Your new office is being prepared. We'll call it Strategic Initiatives. My new office at Vanguard didn't have a name on the door. It was a war room. There was no onboarding, no HR paperwork, just a secure phone line and a list of targets. This wasn't about anger. It was about dismantling a machine, piece by piece. My reaction to Marcus's betrayal was a quiet, cold, and immediate efficiency. Within the first hour, I made 3 calls. No pleasantries, just precision strikes. First, Sarah Jenkins. Her voice was cautious. David, is this a secure line? As secure as the career you deserve, I said. Sarah, Marcus sees your risk models as a roadblock. Evelyn Hayes sees them as a roadmap to dominate the market. Vanguard is creating a chief risk officer position. The official offer is on its way. I didn't wait for a response. I knew her frustration intimately. I'd helped her write the very proposals Marcus had shot down. Next, Tom Alvarez, the best acquisitions analyst in the city, treated like an errand boy. Tom, it's Reed. Stop sourcing deals for Marcus to take credit for. Start closing them for yourself. Vanguard's M&A division needs a new head, not a number two. The head. Finally, Maria Flores, the tech genius Marcus called his secret weapon in public but ignored in private. Maria, I said simply, remember Atherton Tech? I have a list of 3 more just like it. Evelyn wants to fund them yesterday. Are you in? 3 calls. 3 seeds of rebellion planted in the heart of Sterling Financial. Then, I turned my attention to the clients. I handed Evelyn the thumb drive. North Star Logistics, I explained. Their pension fund is a ticking time bomb. This drive contains a tailored hedging strategy that solves their entire problem. Marcus told me it was academic noise. You walk in and present this, and their CEO won't just give you the account. He'll thank you for saving his company. Evelyn held the drive like a key. And what do you suppose Marcus is doing right now? I allowed myself a small, cold smile. Pouring champagne. Telling everyone how he finally cut out the dead weight. He's celebrating his own execution and doesn't even know it. He expects me to be updating my resume, begging for interviews. He's blind, comfortable in his stolen castle. I was right. For a week, there was silence from Sterling's camp. In that time, Sarah, Tom, and Maria all quietly accepted their new positions at Vanguard. Their resignation letters were timed to land on Marcus's desk at the exact same moment. On Friday afternoon, as I sat with Evelyn reviewing the next phase, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a trusted contact still inside Sterling. It was a single sentence. * Marcus just threw his phone at the wall. North Star moved their entire portfolio. He's screaming your name. The calm was over. The storm had just made landfall. I read the text again, not for confirmation, but for punctuation. A single period at the end of a hurricane. I slid the phone across the table to Evelyn. She glanced at it, and a flicker of something, not surprise, but satisfaction, crossed her face. He's bleeding, she said. Now we apply pressure. Pressure isn't enough, I replied, my voice low and even. A wounded animal is the most dangerous. Marcus will be looking for a fight. He'll call his loyalists, try to rally the troops. We don't want to fight. We want to surrender. I stood and walked to the panoramic window overlooking the city. Sterling Financial's building was visible in the distance, a glass and steel monument to one man's ego. North Star was a limb. Now we go for the heart. Evelyn leaned forward, her focus absolute. The Dalton Group. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the skyline. The Dalton Group is more than Sterling's biggest account. It's their foundation. Robert Dalton signed on with Sterling 30 years ago. His loyalty is legendary. To Marcus, that account isn't just money, it's validation. It's old money, old Chicago, telling him he belongs. And you think you can move them? She asked, a sliver of doubt in her voice. Their portfolio is a fortress. Every fortress has a gatekeeper, I said, turning back to face her. For 20 years, that gatekeeper was me. Robert Dalton doesn't trust Sterling Financial. He trusts David Reed. He's 78 years old. He doesn't care about our algorithms or our quarterly reports. He cares about his grandchildren's inheritance. He cares about legacy. Marcus calls him once a year on his birthday and sends a ridiculously expensive bottle of scotch. I had lunch with him every first Tuesday of the month for 2 decades. Marcus thinks the relationship is with the firm. He's wrong. The relationship is with Call TME. I picked up my phone. Marcus made a fatal error. In his rush to get rid of me, he never considered how his clients would react. He thinks they're his. He's about to find out they were only ever on loan. I found Robert Dalton's private number in my contacts and pressed dial. It was a number Marcus never had. He answered with a familiar, gravelly voice. "Reed? I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Saw the news. Damned foolishness if you ask me." "Robert, it's good to hear your voice," I said, keeping my tone warm, familiar. "I'm sorry you had to see it that way." "Don't be sorry, son. Be straight with me. What happened?" This was the critical moment. No anger. No bitterness. Just the quiet confidence of a trusted advisor. Marcus and I had a fundamental disagreement on the direction of the firm, specifically on risk management. My primary duty has always been to my clients. I couldn't, in good conscience, continue to endorse a strategy I believe exposes them to unnecessary volatility. I let the words hang there, a carefully constructed bomb of fiduciary duty. There was a long pause on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in his shrewd old mind. "Unnecessary volatility," he repeated slowly. "You mean he's gambling with my money?" "It wasn't a question. I mean my ability to protect your legacy was compromised," I corrected gently. And that was a line I couldn't cross. "Where are you now?" he asked, his voice all business. "Vanguard Capital." Another pause. "The competition. So the rumors were true." "The rumors are Marcus's version of the story, Robert. The truth is, I went to the one place that would allow me to continue my work. To continue protecting my clients' interests with the diligence they deserve. I'd like to show you what that looks like. In person. The University Club. Tomorrow. 8 a.m. And David," he added, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "don't tell anyone you're meeting me." The next morning, the University Club was quiet, smelling of old leather and generational wealth. Robert Dalton was already there, sitting in a high-backed chair, a cup of black coffee steaming in front of him. He looked at me over his spectacles. "You look like a man who's been unshackled," I smiled. "I feel like one." We skipped the small talk. I didn't present a glossy Vanguard brochure. I laid out a single sheet of paper on the table between us. On it were two columns. The left column, labeled Sterling, listed the core holdings of his current portfolio. The right, labeled Proposed, showed my revised strategy. It was a mirror image of the plan I'd built for North Star, but refined, tailored for his family's much lower risk tolerance. It was safer, more defensive, and, critically, it generated a higher yield. "I presented this exact strategy to Marcus 6 weeks ago," I said quietly. "I told him the market was showing signs of a downturn and we needed to shield our legacy clients. He said I was being overly cautious. He wanted to chase higher yields in more volatile sectors. He was thinking about his quarterly bonus. I was thinking about your family's next 50 years. Robert traced the columns with his finger. He didn't need to understand every derivative and hedge. He understood the intent. He understood prudence. He looked up, his eyes sharp. So he fired the one man who was trying to put the brakes on. He saw caution as a lack of faith in his vision," I said. "He couldn't see it was the ultimate act of loyalty to the client." He leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. He stared out the window for a long time, watching the city wake up. The silence was my closing argument. Finally, he turned back to me. "My father told me to invest in people, not companies," he said. "For 30 years, I thought I was invested in Sterling. I see now I was invested in you. Draw up the paperwork, move everything." I simply nodded. "It will be done." I walked out of the club and into the crisp, morning air. The transfer of the Dalton Group's assets would take 48 hours to process. It was one of the largest private wealth migrations in the city's recent history. The letter from Robert's legal team would be delivered to Marcus by courier that afternoon. It would be brief, formal, and utterly devastating. It wouldn't just be the loss of his biggest client. It would be a public vote of no confidence from the very heart of the Chicago establishment. As I got into my car, the call from Robert Dalton's legal counsel came 2 days later. It was brief and clinical. The transfer is complete. All assets are secured with Vanguard. I hung up the phone. It was done. The keystone had been pulled from Marcus Thorne's cathedral. The ensuing silence from Sterling Financial was louder than any alarm. It was the sound of a vacuum, of a system in shock. My phone lit up an hour later. It wasn't Marcus. It was Sarah Jenkins, already settling into her new role at Vanguard, but still wired into the Sterling grapevine. "David," she said, her voice a hushed, frantic whisper. "It's a bloodbath. The board called an emergency meeting. They're invoking the key man clause in his contract. The Dalton news is spreading like wildfire on the trading floor. They're saying he's lost control of the firm." I thanked her and disconnected. He was cornered. A king without his treasury, his best generals, or the faith of his oldest allies. Now he would look for someone to blame. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID was Marcus Thorne. I let it ring 3 times before answering, walking over to my window that overlooked his building. "David," I said, my voice calm. His was a ragged roar stripped of all its usual polish. "You son of a bitch. You did this. You poisoned them against me." "Hello, Marcus," I said evenly. "I assume you received Robert Dalton's letter." "Dalton? This isn't about Dalton. This is about you. 20 years I gave you a career, a life. And you repay me by gutting my firm? For what? Because I fired you? You were consorting with the enemy." The irony was thick enough to choke on. "You didn't fire an employee, Marcus. You fired a partner. The same partner whose name you erased from the Mid-Con energy proposal. The partner who brought you Atherton Tech on a silver platter. A deal you were too arrogant to see. You didn't fire me for being at a gala. You fired me because you were afraid." There was a strangled sound on the other end of the line. "Afraid? Of you? You were my subordinate." "No," I corrected him, watching the lights flicker on in the Sterling Tower as evening fell. "I was your architect. And you got so used to living in the palace you forgot who drew the blueprints. You forgot who knew where all the structural weaknesses were. North Star Logistics, the Dalton Group. Those weren't acts of sabotage. They were design flaws you created. I just pointed them out to the new owners." "New owners?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you're a big shot at Vanguard? You're a hired gun, Reed, a traitor. When they're done with you, they'll toss you aside just like everyone else." This was the moment, the final piece of the puzzle I had kept just for him. "You still don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice dropping. "You see the world as a ladder. Kings and subordinates. You can't imagine any other way. You think I went to Vanguard for a job? For revenge?" I paused, letting the weight of the question settle. "Marcus, I didn't join Vanguard. I invested in them. Years ago. With the bonuses you fought to cut. With the money I earned building your kingdom for you. The gala you saw me at wasn't a job interview. It was a shareholders' meeting. I wasn't consorting with the enemy. I was protecting my investment from a reckless competitor." Absolute, dead silence. I had just rewritten his entire reality. I wasn't a disgruntled ex-employee. I was the house. And he had bet against it. When he finally spoke, his voice was a hollow whisper, the rage gone, replaced by the chilling sound of comprehension. All this time, I affirmed. "You built your career on my work, then you became terrified I'd do the same to you. You were so busy watching your back, you never thought to watch your foundation. This isn't justice, Marcus. It's just gravity. Everything you built on a lie was bound to collapse." I could hear frantic knocking in the background of his call, a sharp voice saying, "Marcus, the board is waiting." His world was literally coming to his door. He didn't say goodbye, he just hung up. The click of the phone was the sound of a guillotine falling. I stood there, watching his tower, a monument to a hollow king. The justice wasn't in his ruin. It was in the quiet, undeniable truth that he had done this all to himself. I didn't destroy him, I just handed him the receipts. I lowered the phone. The connection severed, but the line to the past felt cut for the first time in 20 years. Outside, the lights of the Sterling Tower seemed to dim, no longer a monument to my stolen work but a tombstone for a king who had crowned himself. The rage I thought I'd feel wasn't there. There was no triumphant roar, no surge of adrenaline. There was only a profound, quiet stillness. The balance sheet of my life had finally been reconciled. The door to my office opened softly. Evelyn Hayes stood there, holding 2 glasses and a bottle of scotch, the same ridiculously expensive brand Marcus used to send to Robert Dalton. A knowing smile played on her lips. "I heard the market just had a significant correction," she said, pouring a generous measure into each glass. She handed one to me. "To new beginnings." We clinked glasses. The expensive liquid burned, but it was a clean fire. "He called me a traitor," I said, swirling the amber liquid. "He called you a threat," she corrected, "and he was right. You dismantled a rival in less than a week without a single hostile action. It will be a case study." She gestured around the room that had served as my war room. "The board is thrilled. They've already approved your new title, Executive Vice President of Strategic Dominance. The corner office next to mine is yours, everything Marcus ever wanted." I looked at the glass in my hand, then back at her. This was the final test. The throne was being offered to me. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I don't want his office. I don't want his title." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "I'm not the next Marcus Thorne," I explained. "I'm the first David Reed. I don't need a throne. Just give me a team and a whiteboard. I'm not here to be a king. I'm here to be an architect." A look of genuine respect dawned in her eyes. She nodded slowly. "An architect," she repeated, a real smile finally breaking through. "All right, Mr. Reed, let's get you a whiteboard." The victory wasn't in watching Marcus fall. It was in refusing to take his place. Who do you think was more in the wrong here? The boss for firing me without knowing all the facts? Or me for keeping my shares a secret in the first place?